our lesson, Tim Junkins.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm back by popular demand. Also, Eric's not here, so that might have something to do with it. But I'm here. Good morning. It's good to see everybody. I got bad news, people. Got bad news. 2014 is halfway over. We are now officially closer to the end of the year than we were coming away from last year. It's July, and that's how math works. As far as I can tell, I'm not that great at math. But it's one of those things that always makes us kind of reflect upon things, because a lot of organizations, a lot of people do functions. Like I used to work at a summer camp that would do Christmas in June or July or whatever it was, and you know, it was always just kind of like a thing because it was like halfway through the year, and it was a way of having Christmas during the summertime, and it was a neat thing to do. But it always made me realize that, like, oh yeah, we really are that much closer to the end of the year. And I always have this running joke to compare time, and the joke is always like, hey, it's only 2 weeks till Christmas. And I say that at all points through the year because it always seems like really far away and really distant, and then all of a sudden, before we know it, it's 2 weeks till Christmas. And it's hard to imagine, given the way the weather is outside. It's gorgeous. It's a little too hot for me, but you know, it's one of those things that like we don't really think about the fall and the winter seasons coming up because like we're here, we're in the moment, we're living right now. And so, what I want to ask you today is it's almost a follow-up to my sermon I did back in January, where I expressed the point that our lives, our goals, are not dictated by lines drawn on the calendar. Just because it's the 1st of January does not mean it's a fresh start. It does not mean that all the problems of the previous year have been gone. They've been wiped away and you'll never see them again. Like, this year will be better than last year. It absolutely has to be. And we have a habit of saying that every year. But more importantly, the point that I made during that sermon was the idea that we don't have to start with goal setting on markers like January 1st. If you want to start a goal, start a goal. Start it today. We can just like there's no restrictions. There's just this barrier inside our own minds that say, well, January is the month for renewal. It's the month that things start over. So I'll go ahead and I'll start that home improvement project. I'll start going to the gym more. I'll start writing more. I'll start doing better at work more, you know, in January. But what I want to emphasize today, and we're going to be reading out of the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, going Old Testament today. You know, primarily I'm more of a New Testament kind of guy, but while I was doing research for the lesson this week, I really found this interesting passage in Proverbs talking about the idea of goal setting and the idea of how we need to manage our time as Christians. So we're going to be looking at the first few verses of Proverbs chapter 3, starting in verse 1, going through around verse 8. Talking about the idea of what it means to set goals as a Christian. Like, when we go out and set forth goals, not just in church, not just in evangelism, not just, you know, when we're here, but when we set goals in our everyday lives. Like, what does it mean to set goals as a Christian? What kind of goals should we set? What kind of parameters, what kind of deadlines should we focus on that? This is speaking on the topic of wisdom bestows well-being, as it's marked in the NIV from which I'm reading today. Starting in verse 1, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man." So it's talking about the idea of having love and faithfulness close to you. Having it close to you every day, having it be part of your daily life. And it says, write on the tablet of your heart. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my tablet. I'm going to jot it. Oh, no, wait, that's not what it's talking about, is it? Because what it's talking about is the idea of tablets back then were much more permanent structures. When you wrote something down on a tablet, it was there. It was not going away. Like this whole document here, this whole thing I got with my sermon, I could, at the swipe of a button, wipe it clean and start all over again. Which would be bad news because then I wouldn't have notes for the rest of the sermon. So I'm not going to do that. But back then, when you write on a tablet, it is a permanent fixture. That information is there for all eternity. So it's talking about the idea of two different things. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. binding it around your neck, talking about the concept of it always being with you. If it's around your neck, it's not going anywhere. It's always with you, it's always with your person. When you write it on the tablet of your heart, it's also always there. When you write down the idea of love and faithfulness and to keep it with you always, then it's always supposed to be there, serving as a reminder to express love and faithfulness, which we've talked about in the past, not something humanity is terribly good at all the time. It's one of those things that I practice and I try and do a good job with, and I do a pretty good job, like 70-75% of the time. It's a pretty good number in my book. But what this passage is asking us is for it to always be present in our heart. It always needs to be there. It always needs to be something that we practice and express and remind ourselves of on a daily basis. So take love and faithfulness and apply it to your everyday life, which includes the concept of setting goals. The idea of when I'm setting a goal, the question is it worthwhile? Is it something that's going to express betterment? Is it something that's going to be productive? And, the answer most of the time is yes, sometimes no, it depends what the goal is. But usually when we go out and we cultivate something, we grow something, we create something, we put it out there in the world, if it is something that is truly inspired by God, then it will come to be, despite the frustrations that come with projects such as this. Really good example, I was over at my parents' house a couple weeks ago. As you all know, I talked about last week, my dad has been kind of bedridden because of the surgery, and they're very traveled people. They don't travel like far and wide too often, but they always travel, even if it's just like to the beach for the weekend. Like they'll have a bad week at work and they'll pack up the car and they'll just go for 2 or 3 days. And obviously that dynamic has changed because of my father's condition. And one of the results of that is my mom decided she wanted to start a garden. She's never been home long enough to have a garden before. And my dad, for Mother's Day, actually got her a greenhouse. And, I don't know if you've ever assembled a greenhouse before. It's pretty terrible. Just the idea of putting this greenhouse together. Not specifically because of the end goal. The end goal is great because you're growing things, you're cultivating things, and you're really contributing something. She wants to grow food and have a garden and stuff. But the art of putting it together was kind of obnoxious, is probably the word I would use to describe that situation. Because it's all, assembling anything. If you ever bought furniture from IKEA, it's kind of like a lot of that concept. You just have big, complicated instructions, and you're trying to put it together, and you have a bunch of people who have literally never seen a greenhouse before. I've seen them on TV, of course, but I've never looked at the greenhouse and go, oh, this is how you put it together. And so after a pretty good amount of time, a good couple of hours, we had assembled this thing. And of course, with the idea of goal setting, the idea is to get to the goal. The idea is you want to be done with it. You want to put it behind you. If you're driving to a destination, you don't really want to drive to the destination. You want to be at the destination. And so if there was a way to get around the hours and hours and hours of driving, then we would surely take it. But that's just part of the process. And so when setting goals, when creating things, when traveling to destinations, when you have a goal set in mind, there's always going to be that step of accomplishing that goal. And that's going to be the really tricky part for us. That's why when people set goals in January and by the time February rolls around they've fallen off of it, it's because they've set this blocker in their own head that says, well, if I haven't started it now, it's not really worth starting. And so they kind of set it aside and they tuck it away. And it was a good couple of years before I actually read through the whole Bible, because that was always my goal. My goal was I'm going to read through the Bible, start to finish, I'm going to do it. And every year around March, I would start to lapse a little. And it would get away from me a little, week to week. And then by the time April rolled around and May rolled around, I was already a couple books behind. I'm like, I'll just get to it next year, I guess. But the idea of goals are that if it's worth accomplishing, it's worth suffering through it. It's worth pushing through it. It's worth catching up with it. If you've fallen behind on whatever goal you've set this year, and speaking of goals in a very nondescript way, because we all have something that we want to do. There's something in the back of our minds, there's a project back there that we want to accomplish. There's something out there that seems like it'll be worthwhile to do, and so we set it as a goal. But then, getting started and finding time, and we're all busy with work or school or whatever it is, and then by the time we get around to it, we just kind of say, maybe it's not worth it. But if it is worth it, then it's something that we really need to pursue. Picking up in verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but I want to talk about this last verse here. Talking about the idea of bringing health to your body and nourishment to your bones. If you've ever, I was going to say heard the expression, but if you've ever felt bone tired, because I'm sure that most of us have felt bone tired at some point in our lives. I go through it about once every couple of months with work. I'll have a particularly bad day. I'll leave for work at 6 in the morning. I'll get home at 9 p.m. It's just been a really long day, and you get home and it's just like right there in your bones. Like you can just feel the pressure of the day. And so you go home and you do everything you can to kind of like get rid of that feeling, to put it aside, so that the next day you can get up and get rid of it. But the idea of like something being, like now take that feeling and polarize it. Look at the opposite of that. The idea of something that is so nourishing, that is so healthy for you, that it'll bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Like the best you've ever felt. Like that really good day that you've had. That Saturday that you woke up at like 7 in the morning for no particular reason, and you got up and you got everything done you wanted to, and you went out and you just accomplished everything, and you really conquered the day. You just got out there and you looked at your goals and you just said, I'm going to do this list. I'm going to do everything on this list. And even when you get to the end of that day, even if you are tired, there's still that satisfaction that comes along with it. That idea of having accomplished something, that I went forth and I did something. And I have those semi-regularly enough. I'm not going to say like every Saturday is like a seize the day opportunity. Some days are sleep-in Saturdays, where I sleep in as late as possible, usually around 9 a.m. because I'm conditioned to wake up early. That's just like my thing, which is really good 6 days a week. So looking at the idea of something being so just healthy, like accomplishing so much that you just feel it down to your bones, you feel the sense of accomplishment. But more importantly, jumping back to verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and shun evil. Looking at the idea of wisdom, of accomplishing something. Because something that may surprise us when goal setting is talking to God. Like really, when you're putting together a project, when you're doing something in your everyday life, back in the normal world, how often do you talk to God about it? How often do you really set aside time and say, God, I really need help getting through this. I really, really do. Because projects are a big aspect of what I do. What I do with my job currently. I'm a projects coordinator. I receive projects. I pass out assignments to people. I supervise them. I make sure things get done. That's what I do for my job. And so it's one of those things where, really, when a project comes along and it's just so terrible and it seems like an impossible goal, I actually do set it aside time and say, God, really need the extra energy today. Especially need the extra energy because about a year ago I gave up caffeine, which a bunch of you will probably be surprised by considering how hyper I am when I'm up here. But I gave up caffeine a while ago. It was just a personal decision. I wasn't getting enough like what doctors might call real sleep. I was kind of hitting the highs and lows and crashing and things like that. And so one day I just decided, just gonna give it up. Haven't had caffeine for about a year. That was one of my goals. And I talked to God a lot during that goal. Talked to God a lot during the post-caffeine period. Because it was something I needed to do. It was something that was going to be for the wellness of my own body and to kind of create a more normal, everyday life for me. Like it's no longer about like feeling high, feeling those highs and crashing. It's more about just being consistent in my everyday life. And it's been a really wonderful journey now that I'm here. But there was a time where it's lunchtime, you're at the vending machine. You can buy a Coke. It's your God-given right. We live in America. I can just go to the machine, I can buy a Coca-Cola. I can just put in the money, get the Coke out, open. Nobody's going to say a thing to me. Nobody knows what, this wasn't a goal I was advertising. I wasn't hey everybody, make sure I stay away from the Coke machine. Because I wanted to really know if I could do it on my own. And The answer to that question is no, I can't do it on my own. I absolutely 100% cannot do that on my own. It is not within my own willpower. So if I look at this passage here, and it talks about being not looking to be wise in your own eyes. Like, if I had approached that from a different angle, I would have said, I've got the willpower for this. I'm Tim, I'm awesome, I can totally handle this. And the end result would have been, I would have been like clawing frantically at the Coke machine, trying to get my money in fast enough to get the precious caffeine outside. But because I didn't look at myself as this all-powerful being who can accomplish anything and who can conquer any goal based on my own volition, I instead turned to God and said, God, I really need this here. And it's not something that we think of. And so what I encourage you to do is, you look at the goal and you go, Tim, it's not really that hard of a goal. To which I say, yes, it is. But beside that point, when we look at setting goals in our lives, when we look at projects we need to accomplish, when personal goals we need to accomplish, it's one of those things where a lot of the time we just don't simply think about talking to God. We don't think about it. Because it seems like such a simple task. I'm going to accomplish this project. I'm going to follow the steps, I'm going to follow the instructions, I'm going to conquer this, and all the credit will go to me. Then about halfway through the project, you're flustered, you're tired, you're frustrated, you're looking for answers about why things aren't working. Inside joke, if you've ever done IT work before, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because that's exactly how computers work. It's exactly how computers work. Is the idea of, you look at a problem and you go, oh, this is a simple fix. And about 3 hours later, you're literally grabbing the monitors by the sides as if it's the shoulders to a human being, going, why won't you work? And so it's one of those things where when you look at any goal, you don't think to talk to God because it seems like such a simple idea. And then when you're in it and you're frustrated and you're tired, it's already too late to talk to God about it. Because you don't want to talk to anybody about it. You don't want to go to anybody for help. This is your problem. And that pride of humanity that we feel as 21st century Americans says that we need to fix the problem on our own. That we can go out there and we can fix this, no problem. And so it's one of those things where I encourage you when you're goal setting, like big or small projects. More importantly, going back to verse 2, let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Because if love and faithfulness are with you in the initial planning progress, then you won't hit that point of frustration. Or when you do, you will be prepared for it, more importantly. Those are the two end results. I'm not going to say that by including God in every plan that you make, that means that every plan is going to go smoothly. Because that would be great. That would be amazing. But that's not really how it works. But the two results are, one, when you hit that point of frustration, you'll be able to deal with it. Or two, if God is in it from the beginning, it has a much higher chance of succeeding. Going back to the very top of it. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. It's one of those things where when you look at that, it seems so obviously simple to us as Christians. If I include God in my plans, then my plans will succeed. My plans will succeed as God sees them fit. It'll prolong my life many years, and it'll bring me peace and prosperity. Is that something that we all want? Isn't that the end result that we want as people? Don't we want peace and prosperity? Don't we want easier lives? Don't we want love and faithfulness in our lives every day? So what's stopping us? I guess is the ultimate question. When we're planning goals, when we're going out there, when we're trying to fix the world, when we're trying to fix something in our lives, when we're trying to increase our betterment, when we're trying to increase our comfort level in our lives, what is it about the planning phase that makes us not include God? Is it a sense of pride? Is it a sense of stubbornness? And of course, as always, disclaimer, not talking to you guys, talking more specifically about myself. But is it one of those things that when we go forth and we try to patch things up, when we try to be better Christians, when we try to improve our lives, when we try to go out there and be a better person, why don't we want these things? Why do we resist them so much? Is it a sense of pride or independence? Is it something that we just don't want there? Or is it the fact that we just simply don't think about it? I think that's probably the more dangerous aspect of this scenario, is the fact that why don't we talk to God more often? Why don't we include Him in our everyday lives? Why don't we include Him in the planning process? Because the promises made here in the book of Proverbs are solid. It's written here as fact. It is written to us that if we include God in our lives, if we include Him in our everyday lives and our planning process, then our life will be prolonged many years, we will have peace and prosperity. It's one of those things where when we look at it, that's a worthwhile end result to have. That's something that we want as people. I want peace and prosperity. I definitely need that in my everyday life. I want it so bad that when I look at this passage, I feel almost foolish looking at it. When I look at it, it's almost like a light bulb going off in my head. When I look at this passage and I read it, I go, oh, that's how it's supposed to work. I just need to set aside my own mental block. I talked a couple times about compartmentalizing inside our own heads, about how we have a headspace, and we have work mode, and we have church mode, and we have play mode, and we have personal mode, and alone time, and all those things. And so it's one of those things that we need to get past those mental barriers that we set. We need to break down those walls internally and say, God, come on in. Come on in, God, and help me fix these things in my life. Because I am incapable of doing so myself. And that's the hardest part right there. Because we live in a nation where we really focus on the do-it-yourselfness of humanity. About going out and doing the research and fixing the problems and going forth and just doing all these things. And it's so hard for us to break down the walls and say, God, I really, really, really need your help. I need your help to fix whatever it is in my life. And so, just reflecting one more time on the passage, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. Looking at the idea of God, understand that God is so powerful that He has the capability to come into our lives and help us fix all those problems, if we let Him. Our relationship with God is based entirely on the concept of us allowing Him to be part of our lives. Because if we put up those barriers, if we put up those blockers, and say, no, I can fix this on my own, I don't need anybody's help, I can do this on my own, I certainly don't need God's help, then God will let us be. That's the whole concept behind free will, is the idea that everybody out there, man, woman, and child, has the opportunity to make decisions on their own. And so I'm here to tell you that I am making the decision to include God in my life. I am making the personal decision to say, God, I am incapable of doing these things on my own. And it is only through your power and through your grace and through your love that I am able to accomplish these things. And that comes with a sense of peace and prosperity, to know that it is not all on us. So, not just the idea of goals as in projects. I'm not just talking about building greenhouses. I'm not just talking about, doing things at your job. I'm talking about the goals in your life that you need to accomplish to make things better, to take that stress load off your shoulders. We've all got something. There's absolutely something in your life bogging you down right now. And I'm not going to ask, and I'm not going to nitpick, and I'm not going to, analyze. But I'm just going to say that God has the ability to remove that burden from you. And when you look at the passage, and when you really, honestly, openly communicate with God, and you really go to Him, and you get down on your knees, and you pray, and you say, God, I need you to remove this from my life. And when it gets removed, you feel so foolish of thinking, why didn't I do this earlier? This is all I really had to do if I really just had to go to God about this. And backtracking for 1 second, when I say I'm not going to ask, I'm not going to psychoanalyze or any of that, that does not mean that I will not listen. And so if you are here today, and there is something, if there's a burden in your life that you need to lift, and you need that prayer for it, if you're here today and you're not part of that, and you want to be part of this, if you want that relationship with God, if you want that understanding, if you want that love, if you want that faithfulness, in your day-to-day lives. Imagine living every day with a better sense of understanding, a better sense of how the world works, a better sense of how God works, a better sense of love and faithfulness in your mind, in your heart, in your body, in your soul. Just a sense of peace, a sense of betterment. If you're here today and you don't have that, I encourage you to be baptized. I encourage you to give your life over to Jesus Christ, who died for our sins so that we can have those gifts. And I ask you to contemplate these things as we stand and sing the song of invitation.